Good morning again. Our verse today comes from Luke chapter 6, verses 36 to 38, and then verses 43 to 45. Starting at verse 36, be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the goodness treasure of the heart produces good, and the evil person out of evil treasure produces evil. But it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. May God have the blessing on the reading of His word.
No good tree bears bad fruit, said Jesus, standing and preaching on the plain. Likewise, never does a bad tree produce good fruit. For every tree is known by the fruit it produces. Every tree is known by the fruit it produces. The good person out of the good treasure of their heart produces good. The good person out of the good treasure of their heart produces good. Over these last 11 months, as we have celebrated these 175 years of ministry, there has been a lot of talk about trees. So it seems only appropriate as we find ourselves in the middle of our stewardship season, as we ask ourselves individually, but also as a collective body, it seems only appropriate that we ask this question: what shall we bring? What shall we bring? And as we ask this question together, not surprising that we find and face a familiar image. From one's branches, a tree produces fruit. However, a tree is, of course, much more than its branches. Those branches are connected to the trunk, and a trunk springs forth from a foundation of roots, roots sometimes partially exposed, but roots most often hidden in the ground, where they receive from the ground, where they receive from the environment around them the nourishment and the strength they need to be healthy. The nourishment and the strength they need to sustain life. Without a good and healthy root system, the fruit cannot flourish. No good tree bears bad fruit, and likewise no bad tree can produce good fruit. It is all dependent upon the foundation. It is entirely dependent upon the roots, the root system. When it comes to our understanding of stewardship, we often mistakenly see it as a cause rather than an effect. We tend to equate stewardship with the roots rather than seeing our stewardship, our generosity, as a byproduct of something greater, something deeper. Generosity is the manifestation of our faith. It's not the only manifestation of our faith, but it is a manifestation of our faith. And our faith is given life and it is given strength from the mercy and from the grace of God. Mercy and grace are the roots of our faith, a faith that produces generosity, a faith that produces faithful stewardship. What shall we bring to God as a sign of our faithful generosity, as a sign of our faithful stewardship? We must bring that which provides life and sustenance. We must bring that which allows for our faith to grow. What shall we bring? What shall we bring? We shall bring mercy. We must embody grace. Even Jesus needed time away. And when he did, we are told, he frequently went off to pray. A deserted place, the garden, or within the context of this morning's lesson, the mountain. And as he went away, Jesus sought intentional time from the hustle and the bustle, the tensions and conflicts, from the demands of ministry. And through prayer, Jesus prepared himself for what was to come in the next part of his journey. Now, in the case of Luke chapter 6, Jesus comes down from the mountain where he has spent the entire night in prayer. He calls together his disciples, and he selects 12 of them, apostles he will call them, and they shall be his witnesses. Literally, they shall be his eyewitnesses, responsible for not only giving testimony, but also in time performing acts of healing of their own, sharing the good news of God, preaching and teaching to bring God's hope, God's justice, God's mercy, God's love, and God's grace to all of God's people. Having assembled his apostles, Jesus then stood at a level place where he began to teach and to preach to the multitudes who had gathered. Where Matthew has this and calls this the Sermon on the Mount, with all of his blessed R's. Luke brings to us a sermon from the plain. Yes, filled with blessings, but also with woes. A collection of teachings and sayings meant, of course, yes, to inform, but also, and more importantly, intended to challenge and to transform persons' behaviors, attitudes, meant to reverse traditional expectations, meant to bring into a present reality the kingdom, the realm of God. Love your enemies, not just your friends. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Turn the other cheek. If someone takes your coat, give them your shirt as well. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. Not do unto others before they do to you, which sometimes is how we approach that. Do good for those who have never done anything good for you and who most likely never will. They never will. Give money. Just give it away. Give money, lend money to those who will never pay you back. Be merciful just as God is merciful. Don't judge others, they won't judge you. Don't condemn others, they won't condemn you. Forgive as you will be forgiven. Whoa, hold on, Jesus. Back up for a second. What did you say? What did you say? Forgive as you've been forgiven? No, before that. Don't condemn, don't judge, be merciful? No, before that. Give money to those who will most likely never give it back? Yes, that's it. No, can't do it. Won't do it. Why not? Because, Jesus, that seems reckless. I know, it does, doesn't it? But that's just how it is. Because that's what grace is. But Jesus, it doesn't sound like good stewardship to just give money away to someone who's not going to pay me back, who's probably just going to use it, waste it, unwisely on whatever. That's just not practical, Jesus. It's just not the real world. First of all, says Jesus, since when has grace ever been practical? I mean, you keep making the same mistakes again and again and again and again. God still loves you, right? God still forgives you, right? God still embraces you, right? Does that seem practical to you? No, it's not practical. It's grace. It's grace. Secondly, I know it's not the real world. I know, says Jesus, it's not the world in which we are accustomed to living. I know it's not the world in which you are accustomed to living. The real world, as you know it, as we know it, is based in capitalism and greed and individualism and selfishness, and not things like faith and mercy and grace. But I'm not as worried, says Jesus, about what you call the real world as I am concerned with this new world God is calling us to embody. I'm concerned with this new realm, this new kingdom of God. Indeed, that's the problem with grace. It just doesn't make any sense. In a world that so often seeks the rational explanation for almost anything and everything, it can be somewhat disconcerting for something that is so irrational, something that is so unpractical, something that seems to be so wasteful, to be the very foundation of our faith, to be one of the sources of our generosity to God and our generosity to other people. It seems hard to believe that our stewardship is directly tied to the grace we extend. Our stewardship is directly tied to the grace we extend. It's hard to wrap our heads around that, but it's true. Grace is unmerited. Grace is unexpected. Grace is most certainly, when offered or when received, counterintuitive to how we have been programmed to respond in most situations and circumstances. And yet, grace is still a response. And yet, grace is still an attitude. Grace is a sense of being. Grace is a way of existing. Grace is the foundation of our faith, feeding it, nurturing it, producing the fruit of generosity and faithful stewardship. If we have trouble expressing grace to God or to our brothers and sisters around us, it's going to negatively impact our faith. It's going to negatively impact our generosity. It's going to negatively impact our stewardship. A bad tree cannot produce good fruit, and a bad tree is defined by its poor, malnourished root system. Also, a good tree can only produce good fruit. And a good tree is defined by its foundation, by its roots. Be merciful just as God is merciful. Be gracious just as God has been gracious. Be grace. Be grace just as God is grace. Be generous just as God is generous. The prophet Micah. The prophet Micah is perhaps best known for asking the question, what shall I bring before the Lord? What shall I bring? And in Micah 6 through 8, there's a laundry list of things that Micah presents as perhaps responses to his rhetorical question. Burnt offerings, year-old calves, thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil. Should I even bring my firstborn child to you, God? What shall I bring? Now, all of those things are generous. And as generous as all of those things are, they really aren't important to God. Besides, not everybody can bring that much before God. Do you have burnt offerings laying around? You got 1,000 rams back at your house? 10,000 rivers of oil you're not telling us about? See, I don't believe that God is in the business of creating economic boundaries as much as I believe that God is in the business of destroying economic boundaries. No, the prophet declares, what God really wants is our commitment to justice. What God really wants is kindness, compassion, and mercy. What God really wants us to bring is a humble and grace-filled spirit. Because from those things, comes our generosity and our stewardship. And I'll tell you, if we don't have grace, if we don't bring grace to God, and if we don't bring grace to every single one of our relationships with our brothers and sisters, no matter who they are, then none of that other stuff matters. None of that other stuff matters at all.